Hello and welcome to the Trusted Professional Podcast provided by NYCPA, the New York State Society of Certified Public Accountants. I'm Calvin Harris Jr., a CPA and CEO of the Society, and I'm your host. This podcast, provided by NYCPA, is one where I interview leaders in the accounting profession in New York and beyond, as well as those who influence this space. We help you connect, learn, and lead within the accounting profession. In this episode, we present an interview with a longtime member, Tim Hammond, CPA. But before we get to Tim, let's discuss our news of the day. As always, I first want to highlight the amazing work being done by our 14 chapters around the state, as well as our 60 communities of practice and committees, all doing amazing events and work throughout New York State. Please go to our event calendar for information on some of our events happening around this state. Additionally, at the time of our recording, we just completed our Moyne Scholarship Fund golf event in Rockland County. We were very excited to have numerous foursomes join us on the course, as well as those who participated in our golf clinic, and we actually raised additional money for the Moyne Scholarship Fund. Thank you to those who participated, and please do stay tuned for additional events related to our scholarship fund. That event and all others are available throughout the year and can be found on the event calendar of the NYCPA website at nysscpa.org. We hope to see you soon at one of those events. Additionally, as we will talk about more in future episodes, we're having the grand opening and open house of our new headquarters on 200 Madison Avenue. We hope that you can join us on November the 19th here in Midtown Manhattan, where you'll get an opportunity to tour our office, see the member-generated spaces that we have set aside, and fellowship with your own colleagues and members within the profession. Please, again, go to the NYCPA website for additional information. Now let's talk outside of the State Society. One of the biggest news items, which we talked about in a previous episode, and frankly in decades, are the two proposed changes coming jointly from the AICPA and NASPA. As part of their efforts, and all of our efforts, in addressing the accounting profession's talent needs and expanding access to accounting careers and more candidates, the American Institute of CPAs, or AICPA, and the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy, or NASBA, proposed changes to the profession's model law. The first change is what is called the competency-based experience pathway, one which would allow CPA candidates to demonstrate their professional and technical skills after earning a bachelor's degree and meeting their state's requirements for accounting and business courses. Essentially, what that means for us here in New York is this proposed adjustment would add on an additional pathway, not take away our 150 or other pathways here in New York, potentially add that additional pathway based on competency. That exposure draft is set for a comment period that closes on December the 6th, and NYCPA has created a ad hoc task force that will provide comments on that on behalf of the organization. We will also be sending out surveys and ways for you to submit information directly to the society so that we can incorporate your comments. Lastly, of course, as a member of the public, you can also choose to individually reply to that item. You can go to the society website for additional information, and we hope that you will keep tracking this as this is critical information. Now, in addition to the competency-based pathway, the additional exposure draft would adjust the Uniform Accountancy Act, or UAA. That one, which has a comment period closing on December the 30th, is what is being proposed to be adjusted to make it possible for the competency-based pathway to be available. Needless to say, there is considerable communication happening both in New York and outside on the status of these. We will absolutely make sure that New York's voice is heard on the matter, and I encourage you to stay engaged, whether through NYCPA on our website or our social channels, because we absolutely want your feedback as we communicate on this critical exposure draft. Lastly, one article we wanted to make a mention of is from Bloomberg on October the 16th, which is why Wall Street is warming to the tokenization of assets. As noted in the article, cryptocurrencies, as many of us know, were invented in the heat of the 2008-9 financial crisis to provide an alternative to banks. Many banks and financial institutions on Wall Street, obviously here in New York, that initially scoffed at the dreams of devotees some 15 years ago, are not only warming to cryptocurrencies business, they're also beginning to adopt the underlying technology. While this is absolutely an ongoing area, part of the reason this is, of course, critical is not just because New York is one of the prime places that this is being reviewed and discussed, but also because the State Society has a very active digital assets committee and community of practice that is focused on this area. So I would encourage you, if you are interested in more on this area, please look to our website for information on the Digital Assets Committee or any other committee that is in your area of interest. So with that said, we'll now go to our interview with Tim Hammond. We are back here on the Trust Professional Podcast. I'm very excited for our guest today, Tim Hammond, CPA, very active member of the society and in the profession at large. Tim is a CPA and partner in the Bonadio Group's assurance service line and healthcare and human services industry practices, and is based in Syracuse, New York. Bonadio is a top 50 public accounting firm with 10 offices located in New York, Vermont, and Texas. Very big firm. Tim has over 15 years of experience serving healthcare, human services, and other not-for-profit organizations with a particular specialty serving hospitals, clinics, and home care agencies. Tim is also a member of the New York State Board for Public Accountancy, which advises and assists the New York State Board of Regents and the New York State Education Department on matters of professional regulation. He is formerly the Secretary-Treasurer and member of the Board of Directors of NYCPA and still serves on the Society's Exempt organization and not-for-profit committees. He's a member of the AICPA, NYCPA, and Healthcare Financial Management Association, that's HFMA. He holds a BS in Accounting and Economics, magna cum laude, as well as an MBA from Moyne College. Tim is also very active in the community and a current member of Moyne College's Board of Regents and a past member of the Board of Directors of Nescentia Health. Tim was just recognized by Central New York Business as a 40 Under 40 award recipient and is a past recipient of NYCPA's Emerging Leaders Award. An amazing bio. Tim, so glad to have you with us here today on the podcast. How are you doing?
Thank you very much, Calvin. Glad to be here.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to jump right into it. This is going to be a great episode. You and I have certainly talked many times over the years, but I figure if this is like every other conversation that we've had so far in the podcast, I am sure I'm going to learn something new, and so will our listeners. So I want to start with the beginning, so to speak. Read your amazing bio, but I want to go even a little further back and talk about your origin story of sorts. So what was your journey into the field of accounting?
Sure. Well, I like to say it was a fairly winding journey. As many of the other guests have said, I don't recall any that just said they were accountant from birth. I started being interested in law, sciences, general business, didn't really know until I ultimately honed that really first in economics and then accounting in college. I was a dual major in college, but ultimately fairly early on in the college career said, I'm going to focus my effort into getting into the accounting profession versus going into some of the common professions that economics majors would go into. My family had always said I'd be a good accountant. I never really understood why until later on, until once I figured out what accounting is really about beyond all the stereotypes. I was sold on it. I did have one accountant in my extended family that I know of. We really rarely interacted, so I won't really say I had really any influence over that decision. So it wasn't like I come from a family of accountants or anything. I'm really one of the first in my family to attend college. And so this is ultimately the direction I went through the guidance from many great mentors. I graduated early, a semester early, and I ended up working at two separate firms, just trying to find my way to smaller firms here in Syracuse. I did leave public accounting for a director of finance role at a fairly large human services organization. At the time, our budget was about $60 million and we had about 1,000 employees. Then I realized that I was one of the few crazy people who wanted to come back into public accounting. There's a few of us boomerangs. I think it was mainly my passion for being social and interacting with a wide variety of people and organizations. That's really the biggest thing that drove me back. Working for one quote unquote client, my own organization, despite the organization being very proactive and cutting edge in their industry, it was still in a way boring to me, just having one stakeholder really, or one small group of stakeholders, and not seeing a more diverse opportunity to solve problems. And I became involved in NYCPA from nearly day one in my career, which I think helped get me a lot of those mentors that helped shape my career. A friend was chairing what was then the Young CPAs Committee, now Next Gen, and asked me to participate. I gladly did so. And from there, I just was kind of hooked and climbed the ladder, first in the Syracuse chapter, one role at a time. And then eventually I became the Syracuse chapter's representative on the board of directors and was hooked in a different way and started a fresh ladder from there, serving several roles for the board of directors, and ultimately ending for now with my 2 terms as secretary treasurer.
You immediately said something I didn't realize. I figure you may have told me this before, but I didn't realize you were a boomerang, to use your phrase, in terms of going in and out of public. I find it interesting. You said very close to what I've heard people say when they go in either way between public, to where you wanted to have more than one client, my word, not necessarily yours. So public ended up being a good fit, or sometimes someone prefers to sit at a desk or prefer to have one constituent and they leave, and there's nothing wrong either way. Obviously, you can make it work.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. So, and for those who aren't aware, Syracuse is certainly one of our most active chapters in the society. We actually had a fairly, I guess it was a few months ago now, we had a pretty large scholarship event for the Moynihan Scholarship Fund, which, side note, the namesake is former partner David Moynihan from the Bonadio group, Tim's firm. So you've been active from day one. It sounds like maybe in day -1. You worked at 2 firms, shortly after. How did you decide between, which firm environment fit best for you?
Yeah, sure. It's a good question. It's one I talk through with candidates now, and certainly, not naming other places I've been, and I had good experiences of both of those. So it was not that either had a negative experience. One, coming out of college was very high on my list, wasn't number 1, but very high. And ultimately, I think the main reason I went there is I was an early grad. I graduated a semester early, and back then, firms weren't necessarily as flexible on the start dates as many may be now. And so this is one that was willing to let me start pretty soon after graduation rather than making me wait the better part of a year. And I'm not from Syracuse. I'm from about an hour away in Binghamton, so I needed to pay rent. I met my now wife in college, and she is from Syracuse, and was pretty clear she didn't want to go anywhere. So I was here to stay and needed to pay rent. So I went with a firm that, again, was very high on my list, but ultimately I think the final decision point was they would let me start early. And so I was there my second longest tenure of any place, and still have what I consider to be lifelong friends from there. Taught me really the entire base of my knowledge. It was a pretty small firm at that time, maybe 35 or 40 people or so. And our audit practice, which I eventually filtered into, was even smaller. I think then it was about 10 people. And at that time, I yearned for something a little bigger. So I did go to another local firm, I think about 100 people or so at the time, but much more skewed towards being primarily an audit practice. Also one that I was heavily into the healthcare world, where I really honed that specialty and decided it was a specialty I wanted to stick into. And again, had a great experience there. I think I had a job come calling, and it was a good opportunity. And I'm one that said, well, I want to see what it's like. And, of course, I was about 5 years in at the time. So I was manager level, and it's now or never to give it a shot. So I gave it a shot. And that was a great experience too. Just ultimately helped me understand what I really liked. I never had a bad experience at any of these places, really.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I hope that, particularly a younger or let's say at least newer into the profession colleague hears as part of the story that even if you've got great opportunities in front, sometimes a lot of different things will come into play for those decisions. And interesting enough, much like you, the first firm I worked at, I still have friends, not just colleagues, but still friends from that experience. But it didn't occur to me till you said it. There were only really 2 times that you started, at least back then, in public accounting. I mean, we're going back decades, but it was either you started in June 1, or you were starting September 1. So I ended up starting to work 2 weeks after my graduation from college. But it worked out well because, much like you, I needed to pay rent anyway. So if they let me start a week earlier than that, I would have said, let's start earlier. So
yeah, if I had no one willing to let me start early, then I would have made some decisions. But I had someone willing to let me start in January, and I said,
yeah,
all right, sign me up.
There you go. It was meant to be. I want to pivot slightly. What do you see as the biggest challenge? I probably shouldn't make this singular these days, but I'll still put it that way. Our biggest challenge as a profession, you can kind of go wherever you wish, or even make it singular or plural, whatever you like.
Oh, well, like you alluded to, there's not just one. The most frequent answer that if you talk to anyone or even on past episodes here is pipeline. And I agree with that. That's a huge problem, but just for sake of shedding light elsewhere, I'll go elsewhere and focus on quality. Particularly, I'm an assurance professional auditor, so it seems like every day, I'm reading about deficiencies or fines on audit firms, large and small, across the world, from various regulators for issues ranging from fairly ticky-tack non-compliance with standards, all the way up to cheating on exams. And I remember there was a recent story about cheating on ethics exams. The irony is there. It so quickly unravels all the goodwill that organizations like the Society and its members continually try to build up as the trusted professionals. When I read about this, and it seems like it's too frequent, it feels like one step forward or 2 steps backward. I think pipeline's probably a part of that. Ultimately, when you have fewer people in the profession, but ever, if not stable, but increasing demands on output, that is a stressor. But I think another point that it exacerbates this is the increasing complexity of standards and laws and regulations that accountants are either expected to or are the logical profession to assist clients with. And we're the trusted professionals, so clients often come to us first. So it's an all too common joke for me. Again, I'm an auditor, so I deal mainly in financial statements. It's all too common joke where a client asks why this year they need to add a whole new page of new disclosures to their financial statements. And my somewhat tongue-in-cheek response is to improve transparency, right? And looking at the disclosures of the last several years, I don't know that any of them are improving or increasing transparency. They're, if anything, muddying the waters. And so ultimately it requires a high level of expertise, and read into that. That means time and commitment to really do it right. I partially understand why firms may not be able to devote that, but ultimately it's still, no matter what the reason is, looks bad in the paper. I don't necessarily have an answer, but something that's definitely a challenge that we're grappling with.
Yeah, well, I could not agree more, Tim. And you packed a lot in there. I was working on a presentation, and I stumbled across an article. It was an article from a year ago, but you can find one even more recent on the same topic, which was talking to your point about audit quality. And it even got to the point of a particular organization, a very large organization, had included in a public filing that they were late because they essentially said because they could not find qualified accountants. And because of that was the reason they were late. Now, they're only late by like a week, but a filing deadline's a filing deadline. A week might as well be a month in some cases. When I heard that, I kind of rolled my eyes, but then I thought about it. I was like, you know what, that I could actually see that as a downstream problem, that if there's not enough people, then the quality will suffer.
It's 100%. That's not only on the auditor, but that particular instance is likely more on the client side. If it's a public company, they're preparing their own financial statements. And it was, I believe I recall the same report as you, and it was that the client themselves couldn't be prepared ready. And that's at a public company. And I've told several of my clients, I'm working much further down the scale in terms of size and complexity and of clients. And I've raised that particular situation and said, if they can't do it, you don't stand a chance. I have a client right now that has 0 FTEs in their finance department. They're scrambling.
Are they outsourcing everyone, or
they're considering what to do? Everyone's left and they can't recruit anyone. So it's a problem in all aspects of accounting, not just public accounting. We can whine and complain about the number of people, but our clients are just as effective, and that also puts strain on us because we want to try and serve and help. There's only so much we can do.
We could make a whole episode on this one topic on staffing. Side note, you and I haven't chatted on staffing in a while. We used to chat very frequently about staffing when you were in the secretary treasurer role. But I don't think you'll find this surprising. Even recently within the organization, a few other organizations I know, the problem hasn't even just been recruiting people, but actually making sure that once you've recruited the person, they're actually going to start, whether it becomes down to individuals getting other offers. I understand people need to do what's best for them and their family. They make other decisions, but that may leave you as the employer in a bit of a tough spot, or even creating an environment to where people want to stay. I'm seeing more and more that even if you are putting a compelling compensation case out there, you're competitive with everyone else, you've created a good, or at least believe you created a good culture. I've seen so many organizations where the staffing problem, when you look at it, I've had people literally tell me, Kevin, what am I supposed to do? And I chuckle, but it's not funny because I'm like, I got to admit, everyone I know has a similar sort of challenge where I'm seeing it usually has less and less to do, this is Calvin's opinion here, less and less to do with compensation and more about the cultural fit, because it just seems to be so tough for people to get the staffing levels where they want. And then, to come back to your earlier point, it's not hard to imagine how the quality becomes a bit of a challenge for us, irrespective of where you live. So yeah, that's a big challenge. But let's go to something perhaps a little more positive anyway. For the things we see in accounting, or even beyond that in the workplace profession, what's a concept or an opinion that you think that so many people get wrong? What do you think people get a little wrong about us?
Sure. Well, there's an oldie but a goodie that the concept to be good at math, and that's not not true in the slightest. I mean, what does everyone think computers are here for? So, not to mention materiality. I mean, get it close enough. There's a saying that I love that that don't let perfection be the enemy of very, very good. And that plays a role and can help with the capacity restraints, where try and spend an hour on something rather than 2 hours. Sure, it can be helpful to do some quick math in your head. It's always in a conversational context, though, and rough and rounded off is fine. So, if you have some of those speed math concepts in your head, that's all you need. What is important is communication skills are so much more important, both written and verbal. If anything, this is a majority sales role, not only selling for new business, but selling a position or selling an explanation. So knowing the right communication medium to use, depending on the situation, making that choice, being able to be concise, but simultaneously sympathetic, defending your position without offending the other side, explaining the why in a way that a non-accountant or maybe a novice accountant will understand, so that they can really understand and learn. There's that saying, teach a man to fish versus give him a fish, and trying to help with that. But the other one I'll also speak about, I don't know if you feel this way, but my observation over the years has been the purpose of NYCPA sometimes is muddied. So many people that I talk to and think of and think it's a regulatory body, and that it deals in licensing. It's has something to do with laws and regulations, like actually passing them and enforcing them, or is an authoritative source to guide how to handle a law or regulation. And rather than a trade association is really what it is. That's meant there to be there to advocate for matters, that are important to CPAs, support CPAs with education, networking connections, and in so many other ways, and also bring new CPAs into the profession. And for that reason, I've always felt like NYCPA's resources are typically underutilized by a vast array of people, not just one particular group. The committees are a great example. They're the hidden diamond of the society. I don't understand why every member isn't on a committee. It just baffles me, that treasure trove of resources there for free with your membership to be able to meet with other practitioners and share information in a non-competitive format that seeks to rise all boats. And I don't know if it's because people think that these committees are meant to like regulate those industries or not, and not what they truly are, or what it may be. But that's something I've observed over the years, is that so many people, even members, don't really understand exactly what NYCPA is there for.
That is so true, Tim. And side note, for those listening, this part wasn't planned. So, but the great part about a podcast is that we know it's recorded. So,
yeah, you're not paying me to say that.
not at all. But I think you really touch on a real critical point here, because even recently, I'm sure you won't find this surprising, Tim, we had these kind of conversations all the time. We were talking about how to get more members engaged. We're very happy and thankful that we're one of the largest state societies out there. Obviously, we're the first. But when we look at our member engagement, and member engagement, I mean someone who's not necessarily just in a leadership role like you've been, Tim, but people who are serving on a committee or attending committee meetings or involved in a chapter, one of our 14 chapters like Syracuse or elsewhere. Because, the way I like to say to people, and you said it a little bit better, is that, irrespective of what you're interested in, there's a place within the state society for you. There's a place for you in NYCPA. If you want to focus on a particular industry, we have a committee for that. We have a community for that. And oh, by the way, if we don't, let us know. We're open to creating one if we find enough, critical mass of people interested. And if you want to focus on local, then we've got our chapters. And if you want to do both, that's even better. But I think the first part you said there in terms of regulatory, that's probably a really critical part, because I'm surprised how often I need to educate colleagues on the difference between NYCPA or NYSSCPA, our full acronym, which, to your point, is essentially a trade association. We are a C6, 501c6 organization, much like all the others are around the country and well, some globally actually as well. So we're focused on that, but we work in a collaborative manner with regulatory organizations, but we are separate and distinct from them. They have powers that we just simply don't, and we have things that we can do that they don't. But in the perfect scenario, there's collaboration there, but there is definitely a difference. And one of the things that we certainly strive to do, and admittedly, this is one of those ways we're looking to do it, is to get folks engaged, get folks interested, and certainly help people who are CPAs find a place that fits for you. Because I don't say we're a guarantee very often, but this is probably as close as I'll get to really leaning into it, that I guarantee if there's something that you need in your profession, the NYCPA will be a place for you. And a lot of other colleague organizations as well. And let me touch on the first one as well. You mentioned not good at math. I will admit that is the most common thing, even now, that I hear from students or and I mean before college in most cases. If I'm talking to high school students or even earlier, and I say, but do I have to be good at math? So you absolutely do not have to be good at math. But you do need to know how to work some sort of device that will help you do arithmetic from time to time. These days, I'm not even willing to tell them what device it might be, because I feel like you could do a lot of accounting work on your cell phone or your laptop, or your tablet, or whatever device. So, side note, I'm not sure that my ability to add and subtract in my head are nearly as good as they used to be before I had all these tools, but that's the way it works. So, but yeah, that is the most common thing I hear about
Believe
that.
it or not, I have a 10 key sitting right to the side right here still. Sometimes I just have to go back to old trusty over here to add something up. But I mean, I'll add on to that a little bit. And it goes to, I don't know if any high school students or high school teachers or listen to this. I think they should, that if you have someone that feels like they're not good at math, feels, they're not in EP math, for example, all the calculus. Yeah, we don't do calculus in accounting. It's more, I would almost favor people who have a heavy interest and concentration in English courses or history courses or those type as being maybe having some of the best skills for what public accounting calls for. And really the way I think of, and it's always helped me, is the numbers in accounting are not necessarily numbers, they're language, the language of business. So all that accounting is seeking to do is take real life events and write them in a language of business. So the set of financial statements is telling a story of a business. And if you can think through it like that, it becomes less about math and more about, doesn't matter what the number is, but whatever the number is, where's the right place for it? Or what is the right timing for it? Almost like writing a book. Where is the right place? What is the right timing? What's the right way to word it or phrase it or explain it? It's like writing a book more than it is doing math.
That's so well said, and I think that goes back to your earlier point on the importance of communication and communication skills. I will admit, if it wasn't for a few professors, actually more than a few professors, who emphasized to me how important the communication skills were, I really didn't think it was that important when I went to school, because I love accounting. I loved accounting. I love doing the problems, and I love doing the problem solving. I said, what do I need to tell anybody about it for? Well, that was a little naive in retrospect. But you're so right that all of those things, fit into there. You can always tell when a student or even a professional gets that, because their approach even to how they handle accounting problems, they think about it from that perspective. And I would imagine, given your role, so much of what you need to do and the people who work for you need to do is being able to take that complex information and make sure that someone who doesn't have your deep knowledge in accounting to be able to present it in a way that makes sense for them. So I guess that still comes back to your ability to communicate ultimately, would you say?
Yep. It's the number one skill. It's not just a throwaway soft skill. It's the number one.
Now, I want to get to a quick little thought experiment. Or not so quick, because sometimes the answers are pretty involved and exciting. So we're going to make you the King Tim. You can be of the accounting profession. You can be far bigger than that if you wish, because you're king. And if you had unlimited resources.
Some people are hearing that and are a little scared.
Yeah, well, wait until they hear your answer. Maybe it'll calm them down, or maybe it'll really scare them. But if you had unlimited resources and no constraints, no time constraints, no nothing, what would you do? What project or initiative or what have you, what would you do to improve the profession? And I probably should start adjusting this question, because sometimes the answer goes well beyond the accounting profession, which is fine. But you're the king, so you can get to decide. What would you do? What would you do exciting?
Sure. Well, I'll stay away from pipeline again, because I think a lot of answers have already been said about that. And something I've always thought of, and I frankly don't know how I would make it work, but I'm the king, so a subject will figure out a way. As someone who's lucky enough to have this experience, again, when I was going through my history, I said I'd never had a bad experience any of the places that I was. And it's particularly true for my stop outside of public accounting. And I look back on that experience, it was now 9 years ago, 8-9 years ago, to this day, about things that I learned from that role that helped me in my current role serving those types of clients. And I'd love to find a way that allow public accounting professionals, particularly those that think they may be in it for the long haul, to temporarily try a role outside of public accounting, generally at a client, risk-free, a 3-month rotation, something like that, just to see the other side of the table. And, I think the concern would be, well, if they see it, they're not going to come back. To me, I think the people that never come back were going to leave anyway. So I don't necessarily have that fear. That may be naive of me, but I think the people that do come back will have a new perspective. They'll have gained that perspective under voluntary terms. It'll be more objective rather than being emotional. And I think a lot of people leave public accounting because they're burnt out or had a bad client experience or what have you. And it's a little bit more of an emotional decision than anything. If you can have a relatively stress-free opportunity to do that and see what it's about, I think you'll get a more objective understanding of that and come back and bring back those new perspectives and be so much better at your job back in public accounting. And maybe it greases the wheels a little bit and makes things easier for you. We don't have anything like that. We do rotations in our excellence and quality role. So take you off clients and you can do, quality control and research and things like that. And I know people that have done that have enjoyed that, but then usually, enjoy coming back to the client role, the client serving role, but with a newfound appreciation for that role. And that's something that has been on my mind of, I wish there was a way to reliably make it happen. I mean, clients would need to have openings, although, we talked about the pipeline outside of public accounting. I would think that it's there, but ultimately my experience, I've been able to build closer relationships to both clients and prospective clients. Due to that boomerang status, I'm one of the few people that can say I was in their shoes, know what they're going through, and know what's important to them versus, just the auditor that's trying to hang them up by their shoestrings on something so that they don't perceive me as that. They perceive me as someone who's actually trying to help them. And that ultimately I'm trying to find the best result for both of us. And it just forged great relationships with the clients I serve now.
I got to admit, while you were talking it through, well, you know me. It was spinning in my head. Is there a way to do that? Because I love that idea. I truly love that idea because I can think of examples, but it's really only a few times I've seen this to where a firm might have essentially a loan staff sort of scenario. But in some cases, I've seen it more of a line of business, not quite outsourcing as much as supplemental in there. But those are often people who are dedicated to that type of work, as opposed to, trying this as a different thing. And certainly it sounds like you have it at the Bonadio group, the ability to work within different functions and rotate that way. But I think, to your point, I think that would be great on all sides. It would, in my mind, help both the person who's working at the organization and the client they're working for to see it from different perspectives, which I think ultimately makes everyone's job a bit better. I think it enhances the quality, and I think it shows some things. And I think it's very possible that people might do a rotation of that to, I can't think of a better word, and decide, hey, I actually want to stay here. But I think you're also right in saying that person was bound to depart or find another thing eventually anyway. If anything, you helped them along to finding it, which might actually make them loyal to you down the line. I remember at one firm I worked for, they were all but encouraged. I mean, they didn't encourage you to leave necessarily, but once they knew a person was leaving, they were extraordinarily supportive. Part of it I know was a business case because they were like, if this person leaves happy, they might be a client of ours and we want them to be happy. But it was also baked into the culture that they wanted their staff to win, for lack of a better word. That, I certainly try to strive this way that, heck, if you're working really well for us and everyone's happy, I certainly want you to stay. But at the same time, I want you to have whatever's the best opportunity for you. And if that's in a different place, may make it tough on my end, but I'd still want someone to be happy. I think that's an amazing idea. All right. Well, we may have to come back to that another time because I think there's something there, Jim.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think public accounting has always been really great about that at every stop I've been at, and just the stories from friends. That's been the case everywhere. So in my head, I'm thinking about more of a intended to be temporary, rotational, more for the educational aspect than anything. But tough to do, but ultimately a lot of the conversation is on capacity and pipeline on our side too. How can we afford to let someone go for 3 months? So maybe for another time, or but I was king with all the resources. You
leaned into it. I love that one. I love that one.
We've done some loan staffing arrangements, and some people on my team have done that, and they have reported positively on the experience. But we do have some of the other things you talked anywhere from. We have a affiliate that does temporary staffing anywhere from short stints to get you by to, longer term placements as well as, full outsource. But I'm thinking more of for our professional staff that we intend to stay here, for our tax friends that work in a client that has their own internal tax department, and see what they're thinking about day to day. And that'll give you a newfound appreciation for just when you go to do the tax planning or tax compliance work.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. So, we're definitely going to mark this particular moment in there, because I have all these ideas circling in my head, but that's for another time, because I think it's a great idea. So I want to pivot one question. Okay, so full disclosure for the listeners, I did not give Tim a heads up on this question. It's not a crazy question, Tim, and you knowing me, you probably won't be surprised with this kind of question coming from me. But this has been a very consistent discussion, at least online, with colleagues recently. So I wanted to get your thoughts on here's the question: who is your favorite fictional accountant?
I figured you would go down this path, so
see, look, no one's ever surprised, but I didn't tell you it was coming, so who knows?
Yeah, so I'm not going to say who I know is your favorite. I won't even speak his name. Amy asked me to not mention his name. Who immediately popped in my head when I was thinking about this, and I don't, unless he's been mentioned on an unreleased episode at this time, I don't think he's been mentioned. But what about Andy Dufresne from The Shawshank Redemption? So played by Tim Robbins, of course. It's not very flashy, but to me, he was a great practitioner. He put his skills into their highest and best use, given his unfortunate circumstances. He was highly practical. He did what he could given the what he was dealt, and he was creative about it. Yeah, and I think most importantly, throughout that movie, maybe he had to bend his morals a little bit to frankly survive. But in the end, he regained those morals. Ultimately, he turned his everyone in and released all those documents. So he retained the ethics and morality in the end too, even though he was surviving. But ultimately, that scene right at the beginning where you kind of get introduced to his skills, where he's negotiating for beers for his coworkers, and he's literally being held over the ledge of a building and is talking about
literally
tax returns, and it's that's just that's what's going through his head, is the only way I can survive not working in the yard. So he immediately popped to my head as a very good portrayal of a fictional account. Like I said, maybe not all that flashy, but one that has resonated with me over the years.
Absolutely. I will say, if someone asks me that question that I just asked, Andy Dufresne is very likely the first name that comes out of my mouth, if not the second, because I will admit, if there's one movie I wish I had seen on a big screen and never have, it would be this movie. So it's one of those movies that whenever it shows up on a screen, I find myself doing it, because I think it's just an amazing film. And there are a lot of accounting and finance lessons in there. So yeah, Andy Dufresne has not been profiled yet, at least from what I can recall. I will say, side note, particularly if you're tracking any of this on social media, we've been talking about a few. I think, and this includes Andy, I'm not sure we've come up with a fictional accountant yet that was not involved in some sort of money laundering sort of scheme. So we have Andy, we had Skylar White, Breaking Bad, and we've had two accountants in The Untouchables, and everyone seems to be involved. So it's not necessarily what we promote in terms of skills, but it is worth noting that none of those endeavors would have been successful without an accountant. So there you go. Andy Dufresne, great choice. So, Tim, I have one last question, and this one we actually did know was coming. We've talked about a lot of different things. I absolutely learned something new I didn't know. But with that said, is there what question or any questions that I forgot to bring up, or anything that you wish we had talked about or touched on? So, what did we miss?
Well, I deferred a lot on pipeline, and so I will circle back. I have some thoughts on it. I've shared these with you. We've had some discussions about how I think about this. And So I'll put my thought process out there. Maybe it resonates with some. It deals a little bit more with retention than new entrants. I think plenty of people are focusing on new entrants to the pipeline, but I think about there being kind of an inherent difference in the two terms career and profession. There's some overlap there, but maybe as a profession is a type of career, but a career in my mind is more of a transactional relationship. So I work for you and you pay me. Progression is up to you, the employer, a little bit more than me. Obviously, I have to earn it, but I don't really have much of a say. The responsibility is on the employer to tell me exactly how to do my job, exactly how to progress to the next job. There's nothing wrong with that. Like we said earlier, I would say the vast majority of people prefer to have a career, but for those of us that might prefer to have a profession to me is kind of a fancy term for an apprenticeship. So we've talked about how I equate apprenticeship to profession a lot. So take a master electrician, for example. They get to their level. They're really their own effort on their own timeline. They may have some formal education, but primarily their education is they serve as an apprentice for many years under another master electrician. The harder they work, the faster they typically progress if they've inherently got what it takes. Again, substantially all of the training is on the job. Sounds a lot like public accounting, doesn't it?
It sure does.
It even sounds a lot like the medical profession, a lot like the legal profession. Even, if you work in a marketing firm versus an internal, marketing department, sounds a whole lot like all of that. And I view the progression of someone in public accounting a lot more like an apprenticeship than I do a career. So while we do have to pursue formal education so much, I mean, maybe 90% or more of the training is on the job from those more experienced than us. The experience is so much more valuable. And I think that's what makes it a little bit different. And so therefore, I look at those coming out that to ensure their expectations are set, that, they're not going to go through a week of training and then have everything that they need to do, where you'll watch a few videos and have everything they need to do the job forever, or to progress. It's a continual learning cycle. And even the master electrician doesn't stop learning at that point. There's always new codes, always new types of buildings and new equipment to install and everything. You have to keep learning. So do partners. We don't know everything, for sure. And so while most of the pipeline discussion is focused on lessening the burden of entry, though particularly the licensing requirements, particularly the education, I kind of view it the other way. And it's a repositioning or reimagining. And it's actually going to sound like I want to make it harder to be a CPA. So why do we require so little experience to license someone as a CPA? Well, ultimately, the CPA license is treated right now, and it has for many, many years, as a rite of passage more than anything. It's a rite of passage for passing a very difficult exam and surviving a year. It used to be just in public accounting, but now any accounting. And how about we start treating it what it really is? It's a license that grants professionals the legal ability to sign in a test report. That's what it does. So what accountant with 1 year experience should be signing in a test report? They shouldn't. And that's nothing against someone with 1 year of experience. Firms certainly don't think they should, because I don't know of a firm that would have a quality control structure that allows someone with 1 year of experience to sign a report. They all require multiple levels of review and ultimately, partner signing or partner equivalence. So firms don't feel that way. And so why is that the norm? So the way I look at it is, if firms stop pressuring people to get the license as fast as possible, if outside employers stop looking for a CPA license with 1 year of experience, it stops becoming that rite of passage, and it allows staff that are in and trying to find their way and trying to hopefully enjoy the job. It takes away one less pressure point. They can actually learn. They can grow in their role just like an apprentice. They can handle the immense workload that is placed on them, and then make the huge commitment over, say, 5 years. I do recommend taking the exam as soon as possible, while you still have your study habits in place and before life comes at you. I can tell you with 2 young kids of my own, there's no way I'm passing the exam today. But
Right.
there's no way I have the study
Just
time.
the time, right?
Yeah, right. But I personally think that more would stay longer. Maybe it's just to get to whatever the threshold is now, from 1 to maybe 5. But I think there's a greater chance of people seeing the light, I'll say, and staying even after that, and have a greater appreciation for the CPA license. As one example, the actuary profession, it takes 7 to 10 years to become fully licensed in that role.
Oh, wow. Through apprenticeship? I feel like I should know this, but I wasn't aware.
It's very similar. You work at an insurance company or sometimes a consulting firm, and you work under actuaries and take a series of exams. It's not all that different from public accounting, and yeah, it takes 7 to 10 years, is my understanding, to become an actuary with all full qualifications. So, roundabout, I don't want to make it seem like it's harder to get a CPA license, but I think it should be harder, and I think that should be okay. And I think that's better for everybody. It's better for quality. It's better for employees, and it's true to what the license is actually there for.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point there. And I enjoyed getting, believe it or not, it might sound strange when I put it this way, I absolutely enjoyed the educational part of becoming a CPA. I very much enjoyed my college experience. I mean, from the learning perspective as well. Let's say, make it more positive. And I do think, though, that my employment part, let's use the same word, the apprenticeship part, is the part that had at least equal, but most times I think more of a benefit to my becoming, hopefully, a strong CPA. The things I learned on the job and the interactions there. Because, when I first became licensed, I technically could sign off on an audit report, but would you want me to? Thinking about me then, no. That guy needed more years of experience. Certainly qualified, certainly was a CPA, but I think there is something to that. And, truth be told, in my opinion, if we look into that part of the profession the way we should, then it just makes sense, because in so many cases, that's when the matching of the theory of that from the education, the collegiate experience, the CPA exam, and then the apprenticeship is the practical, which is frankly what we lean into more on the back end. So I think that's an excellent point. Excellent point. Thank you, Tim. I appreciate all of your time, Tim. It is always great chatting with you. Like I said, despite the many times we've talked over the years, I still learn something new. So, Tim, thank you again for all of your time, and thank you for joining me today on the Trusted Professional Podcast.
Great. It was a pleasure to be here. I always love our conversations. I hope to have many more in the future, and this was fun. I really appreciate it. It was the first podcast I've done, so I hope it comes out well. But
I hope you enjoyed our interview with Tim Hammond.
Thank you.
No doubt you have noticed from the conversation, has an amazing background. We are admittedly miss him as part of our board as a secretary-treasurer. He made outstanding contributions to the society, but we certainly are excited and glad to have someone like him engaged with our Board of Accountancy in New York, and he will continue to do amazing things in the profession on that side. So thank you, Tim, for your time, and thank you for all you're doing for the profession. I want to thank you as our listener for joining us on the Trusted Professional Podcast. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe now to get this podcast delivered to you when it's released. And of course, please do rate and review our podcast, as it helps us continue bringing episodes to you. In addition, if you aren't a current member of NYCPA, I ask you to join us as a member and learn more about our events and activities at nysscpa.org, and follow us on social media. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, including possible guests, please email us at podcast@nysscpa.org. Thanks for listening.